Have you ever found yourself thinking, could doing something bad ever actually be the right thing to do? I know, it sounds like a total contradiction, right? But what if I told you that an 11th century philosopher from Persia came up with this really powerful and, let me tell you, deeply challenging way of looking at it? You're going to want to stick around because his ideas might just flip everything you thought you knew about good and evil on its head.
Okay, let's just dive right in. This isn't some abstract question from an old textbook. We actually bump into versions of this all the time. In politics, in movies, even in our own lives. Is it okay to lie to spare someone's feelings? Is it right to break a rule to get a better, fairer result? Really, what we're asking here is the age-old question. Do the ends justify the means? That's the huge puzzle we're going to try and piece together today.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this in 5 parts. First, we'll set the stage with the main problem, then we'll meet our 11th century guide. After that, we'll break down his pretty startling logic, see how his ideas stack up against other big thinkers, and then we'll wrap it all up with a final verdict that's going to leave you with a lot to chew on.
All right, part 1, a question of good and evil. Before we could even think about answers, we got to get a handle on the real problem our philosopher was wrestling with. And it all comes down to this massive gap between how things look on the surface and what's really going on underneath.
I mean, think about it. We do this constantly. We see a headline about a billionaire donating to charity, and our gut says, that's good. We hear about a leader making some ruthless, unpopular decision, and we immediately think, oh, that's bad. But what if that donation is just a PR move that actually props up a broken system? And what if that ruthless decision is the one thing that prevents a catastrophic war down the line? Our guide for today says our gut reactions are often totally wrong, and we need a much sharper tool to see what's really moral.
So, let's meet the man himself. Our guide on this journey is Nasser Khosrow. He was this brilliant Persian philosopher, poet, and world traveler back in the 11th century. He lived in this really chaotic time, full of political and intellectual drama. And he came up with a radical way to cut through all the moral noise.
And boom, there it is. This one sentence is the master key to his entire way of thinking. Khosrow is telling us, basically, to stop looking at the what and start focusing only on the why. The action itself, whether it's giving someone money or, wielding a sword, is morally blank to him. It's just a tool. The real moral weight, the good or the evil, is found entirely in the purpose, the ultimate goal it's trying to achieve.
Now, this is where it gets really confronting. Khosrow uses this super stark example to force us to grapple with his logic. The act, killing, is identical in both scenarios. But for him, the moral verdict is night and day. The thief kills for personal gain, to get away with a crime. That's a corrupt intention, so the act is evil. Simple enough. But in his other example, the prophet's actions are aimed at a much bigger goal, establishing a new, just society for the salvation of everyone. Because the purpose is for the collective good, Khosrow argues the act itself becomes good. It's a tough pill to swallow, for sure, but it's the absolute core of his philosophy.
So how does he build this whole system? Well, he uses 3 key concepts. The first one is Murad. The best way to think of Murad is the ultimate why. It's not just a fleeting thought, it's the deep, driving purpose behind what you're doing. It's what you're really trying to accomplish.
Next up is Salah. So if Murad is the why, then Salah is the best possible why. For Khosrow, an intention, a Murad, is only truly good if it's aiming for Salah. And what is that? It's the well-being, the harmony, and the flourishing of the entire community. It's a purpose that's bigger than just you.
And finally, how do you know if your purpose is actually aiming for the greater good? Khosrow says you use your aql. Now this translates to reason, but he means something way bigger than just cold hard logic. Aql is like a higher wisdom, almost a kind of divinely inspired insight that lets you see past your emotions, figure out the true murad of an action, and judge if it really leads to salah.
Okay, so we've got our key ingredients: Murad, the intention; Salah, the greater good; and Aql, reason. Let's move on to section 3 and see how this all cooks down. How does this system of reason actually end up justifying actions that, on the surface, seem just plain wrong?
So this is where it all clicks together. For Khosrow, it's all about the results. The morality of what you do is judged almost entirely by its consequences. If a really tough, even brutal action leads to Salah, that collective well-being, then true reason, or Aql, has no choice but to call it a good act. The end really does justify the means.
And man, he does not pull any punches. He basically lays out this brutal moral math problem. Is the well-being of 100,000 people worth more than the life of one person who is actively harming them? For Khosrow and his system of pure reason, the answer isn't just yes, it's that making this choice is actually praiseworthy. It's a chillingly logical conclusion.
And he keeps hammering this point home with these little stories. On the one hand, you have a father who does the unthinkable. He kills his own son. On the surface, it's pure evil. But the reality is, the son was a violent criminal terrorizing the whole community. The father's real purpose, his murad, was to bring safety and peace, to achieve Salah. So reason says the act was good. Then, on the other hand, you have a guy giving someone weapons and supplies. Looks like a kind gift, right? But he knows the other guy is a bandit who's going to use those gifts to rob and kill people. So the seemingly good act has an evil purpose and is therefore judged as evil. It's all about what lies beneath.
So, to ramp up this whole section, let's use his own words. It's all about reason judging acts by the measure of the purposes within those acts. For Nasser Khosrow, it really is that simple and that complicated. The purpose is everything. The appearance, it's nothing.
Okay, so this way of thinking, it might sound a little familiar, or maybe it sounds completely bonkers to you. So for our next section, let's take Nasser Khrosrow's 11th century ideas and put them into a bigger global conversation. How does his moral blueprint stack up against some of the major ethical theories from the West? So in Western philosophy, when you ask what makes something right or wrong, you usually get one of three answers. First, you have the consequentialists. They're on Team Khosrow. They say it's all about the outcome. The best action is the one with the best results. Then you have the deontologists. They're all about the rules. For them, certain things like lying or killing are just always wrong, period, no matter what happens. And finally, you have virtue ethicists, who are more concerned with character, asking, what would a truly good person do?
This chart really lays it out perfectly. You can see Khosrow's philosophy is a lot like utilitarianism. They're both laser-focused on the greater good. The big difference, though, is where that judgment comes from. Khosrow says it's from a divinely guided reason, while a utilitarian like John Stuart Mill would say it's all based on a human calculation of what creates the most happiness. And then you have the complete opposite with someone like Immanuel Kant and his deontology. For Kant, killing is always wrong. Full stop. He would look at Khosrow's logic and probably say it's a recipe for disaster.
You know, there's another really fascinating parallel here, going all the way back to ancient Greece with Plato. His idea of the philosopher king is this super-wise ruler who is justified in making tough, even harsh, decisions because they can see the big picture that ordinary people can't. It's a lot like Khosrow's wise person using their AQ. Of course, this raises the exact same, really scary question for both of them. Who gets to decide they're the one with the superior reason, and who holds them in check?
All right, let's pull all these threads together now for our final section. We've dug into this really tough, really provocative moral system from nearly 1,000 years ago. So, what's the big takeaway here?
If we wanted to try and think like Nasser Khosrow, it would be like running through a 3-step checklist in our minds. Step 1, you have to totally ignore your gut reaction to how an action looks. Step 2, you have to play detective and figure out the real deep-down purpose, the murad, behind it. And finally, step 3, you have to weigh that purpose against the ultimate goal of Salah. Does this really serve the greater good?
When you get right down to it, Nasser Khosrow's message is that morality isn't some simple rule book of do this, don't do that. No, for him, it's an active, difficult, rational process. He's demanding that we look past the easy, surface-level judgments and evaluate actions based on what they're truly trying to build in the world. And that, of course, brings us to the one massive and maybe a little unsettling question that hangs over this entire philosophy. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. Your support really means a lot and helps me keep creating content for you all. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, back to our final thought. If we accept this idea that the greater good can justify an act that seems evil, who on earth gets to decide what the greater good actually is? That's the question I want to leave you with.